hope you are happy and healthy today. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it or not, but it is storming right outside my window. I'm not sure if the microphone will pick it up, but if you hear something strange, it is just some thunder and rain. Today I am making just some miscellaneous ephemera. I thought I'd pull out my punches and punch out some cardstock that I coffee dyed and then make some fun ephemera with it. So this is just a label punch from Stampin' Up! And I'm just trying to find a place on the paper that I like a lot, and I'm going to punch it out, ink around the edges, and I am going to then start layering this with some other pieces here, and ultimately it's going to turn into a tag. I look through these pieces. I decide I wanted to use a flower on here, so I will take my ink tool and blend. I can't talk today. Take my ink tool and add a little ink around the edges, and I'm going to just start layering things up. Now, I thought cluster was just a little tiny, so I'm going to add some bulk to it or some, paper to it to make it bigger. And this is encyclopedia paper that I coffee stained using my rulers to tear out the shape that I want. And like I had mentioned, this is going to end up turning into a tag. And so far I really like how this is looking, but definitely need a little bit more going on. So I want to also stiffen this up a bit. The encyclopedia page is very, very thin, especially after you coffee dye. It's very brittle. So I always back this onto another cardstock or another piece of paper so that it adds some stability to the encyclopedia page. I'm going to end up trimming out some of this cheesecloth that I also dyed with some coffee. And this is just going to go on the side of the encyclopedia page, and I just took it to my sewing machine and zigzag stitched it. I really like this kind of messy, kind of haphazard looking look to the cheesecloth. And if you're looking for cheesecloth, you can get it on Amazon. That's where I actually got mine. And I got a cheaper version because I wanted something that was not going to be as maybe tightly woven, or at least that was my thought process. I don't know a lot about cheesecloth. I don't actually use it for cooking, so I don't know if there's good and worse cheesecloth, but I thought if I got a cheaper brand, it was going to be a little bit more, textured than maybe something that was more tightly woven. So now I'm just making a tag shape using my scissors there, and I am now going to start kind of layering things up. I decided I wanted a couple buttons, and then when I pulled these kind of purpley pink buttons out, I realized, you know what, I really want some color on this tag. So in a second here, you're going to see that I'm going to pull out some Heidi Swap Color Shine, and I'm going to add that to the tag here. And it does have a little bit of shimmer, but I end up blotting a lot of it up. This color is raspberry. And I'm just going to take the wand out of the bottle, or the spray nozzle out of the bottle, and just kind of tap it on until I get the colors that I like and the amount of little dots that I like. And I'm actually even going to take the tip of it and touch it to the tag here and there. So what I'll end up doing is just blotting a lot of this up with a paper towel because I didn't want it to be too dark, and I was also lazy and I didn't want to wait for it to dry, or impatient I should say. So I ended up just daubing it up with a paper towel and then using a little bit of a heat gun on it. So now I'm really liking how that looks. So I'm going to start gluing everything down. Using my 3-in-1 glue, I'm going to add the cheesecloth here. I find that's one of the better glues to use. It's kind of got a little bit more, it's kind of more viscous than some of the white glues. I don't think the white glues hold quite as well. And this is more kind of like a rubber cement. It's an alcohol based and it dries really quickly. So I like using this on a lot of my projects. So I'm going to glue that cluster down here as well. And then I will end up adding some black stitching to the buttons. I just can't put a button down without putting stitching in, so pretty much all the time when I add a button, I'm adding some kind of stitching. This time I'm going to pull out some of my black embroidery floss, and I believe I use 3 strands. I don't think I'm going to show you or show me doing this for the whole time. No, that's good because that would have been really boring. So there's the 2 buttons, just gluing them down again with some of this 3-in-1. 3-in-1 is the same thing as Fabric Tack. It's made by Beacon. So if you're looking for it, I bought mine on Amazon. So I really like how this is looking. And what I'm going to do is I feel like I need something at the top because it's a tag. It just can't be left alone. It looks a little naked when it doesn't have anything at the top. So I will look through my stash here and I'm going to pull out a piece of paper that's just a scrap from something else I've made, and I'm just going to fold this in half and then attach that just by gluing it. I will ink around the edges just so you don't see that white core so much. And then that's just going to go on there. Oh, and I will ink around the tag too. I just like the depth that it adds when you add the ink, so I like to do that a lot. So there's one thing done. Now I'm moving on to another little embellishment. Here is one of the labels that I punched out with my Stampin' Up! Label punch. Just looking through some of my fussy cut flowers and things, trying to find out what I like best. And sorry, I kind of zoomed out here. I'm trying to keep my camera zoomed in, but if I pause and I go do something, sometimes my camera goes back and I forget that I had it zoomed in originally. So I apologize. I know it's a little easier to see when I'm zoomed in, so I will try to be better at staying zoomed in, but sometimes it just doesn't always work out. So I like this little bird, but I felt like it needed something else. It was just looking a little too plain by itself, and it's a little too thin. I print most of my fussy cut type of things on just regular copy paper, so it doesn't have a lot of heft to them because most of the time I'm gluing them down directly to a page. And with this card, it's kind of the same thing. I needed to back it so that it wasn't so flimsy. I'm going to cut this paper down a little bit more, or actually no, I forgot. I didn't really like, I thought it was a little too dark, the background. So what I'm going to do is just take my blending tool and add a little bit of ink to this, and it's a much lighter look, and I like that better. The other one was just a little too dark. The coffee staining on it was a little too much. I believe I keep those torn edges at the top, if I remember correctly, and I'm just adding a little bit more ink where I thought it needed. The paper that I have there on the right hand side, that one I just punched with a punch that I actually got at like a Goodwill type of store. It wasn't Goodwill, but it was one of the thrift stores in my neighborhood. There was a huge thrift, what do we call it? Like, I don't know, Thriftapalooza type of thing. I don't know what it was called. But over 2 days, you could go to all the different thrift stores in the neighborhood and you got your card punch, and then you got entered into a drawing to win this huge basket of stuff. And they had all kinds of sales and everything going on. It was a lot of fun. I went with my husband, a friend of ours, and my daughter on one day, and then my mom on another day. It was kind of right before all this COVID stuff started happening. So I got my fill in right before we went on quarantine. So that was nice. So I took that label, I decided to put it in a different place. I put it up there, and I thought it was a good anchoring place for one of these flowers. So just going through my stash, trying to figure out which one will look best, getting my glue stick out and then gluing that down. I like, this is like a purple thistle type of flower, and I like how that looks. So next, I feel like I need to back it even more, and I'm going to add some fabric too. So in a minute, I'm going to back it. Because it's on that kind of dictionary paper again, it is pretty thin, so it needs to have a little bit of a cardstock or something to have a bit more stability. Here is some vintage trim that I have. I think this is called tatting, maybe? Maybe. You guys can let me know in the comments below if that's correct. I think I've heard someone refer to it as tatting. I am not a sewer. I have no idea. I'm just going with what I've heard. But I really like how it looks. It's just kind of fun. Add just a little bit of texture without having a lot of the bulk of some of the other laces that I have. Glue that down with my Fabri-Tac, and now I'm pulling out some coffee dyed cardstock. Just going to use my glue here to glue everything down. I'm going to trim around all the edges, and then I don't know, I didn't really think ahead. And so since some of my pieces and parts up here at the top are kind of sticking out over the edge, so it's not a straight edge, I'm kind of finagling with it and trying to get it ripped the way I like. I don't know if I really like how the top of this one turned out, but it's okay. It does look like it's supposed to be like that, but it's just maybe not exactly what I was looking for. But it's all good. It works out. I'm going to take my Tim Holtz Stampers Anonymous stamp here that I have. This is the one that came on with the other bugs and butterflies, and it has a scripty stamp that's pretty cool. And I'm just going to kind of randomly stamp kind of all over this back of a card just to give it some texture. This will still allow you to journal on it, but just gives you something else that is not just a plain background. So that's what that turns out to be. I'm just using a wet cloth to clean that off. Those Distress Oxides clean off really, really well. I'm just using like a wet cloth. And now because it is a Distress Oxide, I do hit it with my heat gun because it tends to smear a little bit more than some of the other stuff. So I just add some stitching around it, and then that card is done. Now I'm moving on to something else. This one's just going to be like a little embellishment. It's not going to be anything too big. I am taking this little flower and then another little sprig, and I'm going to add that to this little scallop punch piece. I'll ink around all the edges with my Distress Oxide, and then I will also pull out a little bit of fabric to also add to this little circle. Trying to kind of play with this little fabric, trying to see how I want it to be. I'm trying to decide, can I glue it down like this? I think I'm going to need to stitch it to make it work. It was a little too long. I just really just snip a little piece and then I rip it. I like the rip from frayed edges. I love the texture that that gives. It's also very satisfying. If you've never like ripped fabric before, I don't know. I like ripping fabric. It's kind of like fussy cutting. Does anybody out there like absolutely love fussy cutting? Is that super therapeutic to anybody else? I love fussy cutting. Actually, when I was a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator, I know this isn't exactly fussy cutting, but I absolutely loved cutting out the red rubber stamps. Before they used to trim them out for you, you had actually cut all the red rubber stamps, and I loved doing that. I don't know why, but it was really therapeutic. I don't know if I'm just strange. I don't know if anybody else out there liked doing that, but fussy cutting, ripping fabric, cutting out red rubber stamps, all of that was fun to me. So I'm just going to stitch on to this little cluster a little blue button and just using some of that DMC black embroidery floss. This is going to be the last thing here. I'm going to make a little pocket. I thought I was going to use these little banner pieces that I made, but I decided against that and I'm going to go with something else. I have this piece of scrap paper here and a piece of vellum. I'm going to take this vellum and fold it and make a pocket. And then with that scrap piece of paper I had just a second ago, I'm going to actually punch out one of the flowers from it. This, I was thinking about using my scallop punch, but I didn't think it was going to look as nice, so I'm using this one that has more of a peaked edge to it. Peaking, like a peaking shears edge to it. And I thought, oh, maybe I'll put this little cluster I just made, but no, I decided I'm going to do something different. So here's where I punch out that little pansy with my scallop punch. I thought I was going to use this side, so I ink everything up, and then I start pulling out some of these butterflies, trying to figure out what might look good on it. Ultimately, I'm going to end up flipping that punched circle out, or over, I'm sorry. And I fussy cut the butterfly out, and I'm just going to add that here to the cluster. And I like the label. It kind of gives a place for the butterfly to rest. And I want to do some stitching around the circle, kind of use like a trail from the butterfly, and it doesn't go as well as I was hoping. So I kind of had to move the circle around a bit to get it into the place I want, but you know, it's okay. Nothing too bad. I kind of cover up my boo-boo. It kind of got a little more crooked than I wanted, but you know, this is just having fun, getting creative. It's okay if it's not exactly like I want it. I don't really like it on the right, so I'm just going to put on the left and make it work. I will ink around that label that I punched, and I will ink around the entire pocket. So while I'm doing that, I just want to thank you guys so much for joining me again today. If you enjoyed the video, please give me a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please subscribe. And if you want to know when I put the next video up, you can click on that bell to let you know when I have another video up. Hope you guys are staying healthy and happy and having a good time. Hope you guys are getting in your craft room and getting a chance to play with your stash. I did a bunch of fussy cutting. I got a bunch of printables from my porch prints, and I have been doing a bunch of fussy cutting. I find that very therapeutic, which I either mentioned either in this video or the last video. I don't remember anymore. But I have been doing that, so you'll be seeing those pretty soon. If you haven't checked out my porch prints, definitely check them out. If you like fussy cutting, she has some great little flowers and butterflies and woodland creatures and things like that, so she's got some good stuff. So I inked around that. I had done some stitching on my sewing machine using the black thread, as you can see, and then I'm just going to glue this all down with my 3-in-1 glue. I like this too on the vellum. If you've ever glued on vellum with a wet glue, it does make it pucker and get wavy. With this 3-in-1 glue, it doesn't end up doing that, so everything stays very nice and flat, so I really like it. So now I'm just going to bring in all the things that I did to show you guys, I believe. I will also have some still photos at the end so you can take a closer look. Thanks again for joining me. Hope to talk to you guys again very soon, and I will talk to you next time. Bye-bye.